Alrighty, well, now that we're 2 minutes past the hour, I think we can officially get started. So, welcome. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Drew Scammell, and I'm a program associate with the Inclusive STEM Ecosystems for Equity and Diversity, or IC program, at the American Association for the Advancement of Science, AAAS short. On behalf of AAAS and the Robert Noyce Teacher Scholarship Program, I'd like to welcome you to today's NSF Proposal Writing webinar for Track 4 Noyce Research. Today, we'll have joining us today the wonderful NSF Program Directors, Drs. Jennifer Lewis and Kimberly Tanner. And before I hand it over to our NSF colleagues, I have a few housekeeping notes for us. This presentation is being recorded, and that recording will be made available in the coming weeks on the NSF Noyce website, nsfnoyce.org. You'll also receive an email with a link to the recording when it's available, and we'll also have the slides available on the NSF Noyce website as well. Additionally, we have closed captioning for the session. If you need it, you can download and view the full transcript by clicking the CC button at the bottom of the screen. Before I hand it over to people we're here to hear from today, I just want to mention as well, for any questions, because there's a few Q&A sessions throughout, we'll be leaning more towards the chat feature. From there, you can message the host directly, and we'll be able to field questions from there. And without further ado, our NSF friends, over to y'all.
Greetings. Welcome, and we'll go to the first slide. We really appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to join us for this 2024 webinar on the Track 4 Noyce Research track of the Robert Noyce Teacher Scholarship Program. I am here today with my esteemed colleague, Dr. Jenny Lewis, who's a program director with Noyce, and I will say a few words and then hand it over to her. My name is Dr. Kimberly Tanner. Please call me Kimberly, also a Noyce program director. We're going to be talking about Noyce Track 4 ideas today, but they all are all the ideas we're going to talk about can be found in the solicitation. And when you go to download the slides after the webinar, there are hyperlinks throughout that will take you to lots of useful information, like the blue solicitation link there. So please know that you can go back and follow those. All right, next slide. Noyce Track 4 is all about Noyce research. Next slide. Today we're going to talk about things in 3 chunks. So for the first part of this webinar, I'm going to hand it over to Jenny, who's going to talk about general information about the solicitation, bit of program background, some information about grantee eligibility, some required elements, and some examples that might be useful. Then we'll pause for some time for question and answer. So if you have questions that are bubbling up, you can sort of type them somewhere, and then when we get there, paste them in the chat, and we'll read them out loud and do our best to address them. And then I'll come back and share a little bit about advice on preparing proposals, share a bit of insight around NSF merit review for folks who might be very new to that process, as well as some proposal writing tips that come from the wisdom of lots of Noyce folks who are not here with us today, but that have proven helpful. Then we'll stop again for some questions and answer session, part 2. And then we'll close with Jenny will share a few other NSF educational research opportunities that might be of interest, and we'll have time for some additional conversations. So we should not go over the hour. We should have plenty of time. So next slide, please. So the most important thing is the proposal deadline, which you hopefully are already aware of, will be Tuesday, August 27th of this year. It's always the last Tuesday of August. And there's a link on this page to the Noyce program website, lots of additional program information in addition to the solicitation. Next slide, please. We are here on behalf of a fabulous team of individuals who make up the Noyce program team. So Dr. Jennifer Ellis, who's our Noyce lead, Dr. James Alvarez, who's our Noyce co-lead, Jennifer Lewis, who I'll call Jenny, so that you do not confuse the two of them, and then lots of other wonderful folks that we work with on the team. At the end of the presentation, we'll have all of their email addresses, and you're always welcome to reach out to either one of us or any of them after the webinar. Next slide, please. All right, and so there are lots of tracks in the Noyce program 4 in particular. We are going to focus on Noyce Track 4 today. I will say I think we're going to have access to links to the other webinars happening this week and next week for the other tracks. But Noyce Track 4 research, just to give a really high-level synthesis, is about engaging the community and conducting research on STEM teacher effectiveness and retention. That's really key, both STEM teacher effectiveness and retention in high-need school districts. The core funding for the Noyce Track 4 awards is up to $1 million with a project duration of up to 5 years. And there are some adjustments that can be made to that that Jenny can tell you more about. But that's the kind of core of what we're going to talk about today. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Jenny Lewis, and thank you for sharing more now.
Thanks, Kimberly. I'm seeing the names pop in, and there's some familiar names and some new names. I'm really glad to see everybody here, and this level of interest in Noyce Track 4 is great. I want to mention one thing on the previous slide, and that the capacity building track we'll talk about a little bit. If you're thinking about Noyce Track 4, but you think I'm not quite ready for a full proposal, the capacity building track may also be attractive to you. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit later. Next slide, thanks. All right, so let's get the basics out of the way. For Noyce Track 4, if you're going to put together a project team, typically you'll have more than 2 people on it, but we do ask that you have at least one person who's got expertise and experience in STEM education research, and one person who's got an advanced degree in a STEM discipline. And again, the team's usually larger than 2 people, but just make sure you have those 2 individuals on the team. From an institutional perspective, proposals can come in from institutions of higher education, also from nonprofits that offer a teacher education or residency program. So a museum, for example, might be a case of that. And then also professional societies or similar organizations that are directly associated with educational and research activities. If you have the good fortune to be invited to be on a bunch of Noyce proposal teams, there's no problem with that. You can lend your expertise to as many teams as you like. And institutions, nonprofit entities, or professional societies can submit, if they choose, multiple proposals to the same solicitation. Again, no problem with that. So if you have different ideas, feel free to propose them both in separate proposals. Next slide. Okay, as Kimberly said, the Noyce Track 4 research strand is supposed to be heavily focused on 2 things: teacher effectiveness and retention in high-need school districts. Both effectiveness and retention need to be part of every proposal, and there needs to be a clear understanding of a high-need school district in the proposal. And of course, it has to be STEM subjects as defined in the Noyce solicitation. And that's true for all of the tracks. STEM is defined for Noyce in a particular way, and I encourage you to read the solicitation to be sure you're aligned with that definition. The goal of Noyce Track 4 is to create a knowledge research that feeds STEM teacher education with a specific focus on high-need school districts. The idea is that we want people who are really engaged in this work to be producing the new knowledge about this work, so we grow as a community. There's no restriction on the kind of research methodology you might want to use. Whatever is appropriate to the research questions that you're asking is the methodology that you should use. Qual, quant, mixed, research syntheses such as meta-analyses or metasyntheses, all is great. Whatever helps you address your research question. As Kimberly said, the budget can be up to $1 million for up to 5 years. And if you happen to be doing a project that involves working with established Noyce projects, you could get up to $100,000 for each additional Noyce project that's involved substantively in the research, but no more than 15, and even that's probably practically too many, but we set the cap at 15. Next slide, please. If you're thinking about what kinds of ideas might fit this solicitation, just remember, we're going to say it over and over again, the studies have to focus on STEM teacher effectiveness and retention, both, not one or the other, but both in high-need school districts. So your research might be looking at characteristics of teachers that predict who will be likely to stay as in a high-need school district as a highly effective teacher. Or you might be looking at characteristics of STEM teacher preparation programs that would be predictive of having highly effective teachers staying in high-need school districts teaching their STEM subjects. You could really focus on Noyce scholars or fellows, although you don't have to, and investigate what is it that allows them to remain as effective STEM teachers in high-need school districts after they've completed their obligatory service requirement from one of the other tracks. You could also focus on the high-need school districts themselves and investigate what kinds of things are going on in the district that encourage retention of effective STEM teachers. There are many more things you could do, but hopefully this flavor gives you the sense that we're not trying to be prescriptive, except for three things: effectiveness, retention, high-need school districts. All right, I think I've got that all. Next slide, please. So required elements of Noyce Track 4, when you're putting the team together, it should be obvious that you have the expertise that you need to conduct the research. So make sure that that's evident, that the project team expertise matches the work that needs to be done. Make sure that you're situating your research design in current literature and theory, so it's very clear how you'll be making a contribution based on what is known and growing the field further. I've mentioned you can choose any methodology you want, any research strategies you want, as long as those are the right methodologies and approaches to address the research question. Reviewers are typically looking that you've got data collection that makes sense for the research question, and you plan to analyze the data in a way that's going to clearly lead to answering the question in a robust way. They're looking for that nice chain of reasoning through the proposal. And then they're going to look to your lit review and your explanation of theory to see that you really do have a place to make a contribution to grow our knowledge and understanding in the field. We also ask that you have some plan for external feedback on the progress of the research project. So that can be an external evaluator, if that's your preference. That can be an advisory board, if that's your preference. Whatever you're planning to do, you should explain why that makes sense for your particular project and how that's going to work, how that feedback will be based on data and then able to be acted upon by the project team. Next slide. Okay, so some weaknesses that we have seen over the years of Noyce Track 4 proposals. Even though we say it over and over again, sometimes proposals will have a really good focus on how to get teachers to stay in high-need school districts, but they'll say nothing about effectiveness. And so they don't meet the requirements of the solicitation to have both effectiveness and retention. Sometimes I give proposers advice to have sections in the proposal, operationalization of effectiveness. Here's how we're going to measure effectiveness for this proposal. Operationalization of retention. Here's how we're thinking about retention for this proposal. So it's very clear, reviewers can find it, and you don't forget to put it in the proposal because they both have to be there. Reviewers also find it hard to accurately review a research plan that doesn't clearly articulate those research questions and have that chain that I was talking about in the previous slide. Reviewers really want to be convinced that you know what you're trying to get at, you're going to have the right kind of data to get at that thing, and you will have a way of analyzing it that's robust enough to really answer the questions definitively. We also sometimes see, and this is the last weakness I'll talk about, a really nice proposal come in that's a very strong evaluation of a single institution's STEM teacher preparation program. It's got effectiveness and retention operationalized. It's a really nice strand through the proposal about addressing the questions about effectiveness of the program, but there is not a clear demonstration that knowing about that single institution STEM teacher prep program will help the rest of the field move forward. So that's the case that you would need to make if you wanted to focus on one teacher preparation program. Next slide. And I said we would talk about capacity building. So if I'm talking about these things and you're thinking, well, I have an idea, but I'm not sure I'm ready to have all that there. The capacity building track is really designed to help you pull your team together, maybe get some pilot data, explore how will we operationalize effectiveness, right? What are some data sources available to us? So these are a great way to prepare for a track 4 proposal. One thing I'll say is, there's no necessary requirement for these. It doesn't mean that they have to be focused on needs assessment. They don't have to include pilot data. It's really you making the case, here's where we're going, and here is what we need to do to build capacity to be able to produce that track 4 proposal. These have a budget of up to $100,000 for up to 1 year. And again, we really think it's a good use of time to prepare to write a strong track 4 proposal. Next slide. Okay, that was a lot. So I'm going to ask you to reflect on whether these propositions are true or false. So I'm going to go through them one by one. From what I said and your understanding of the solicitation, is it true that track 4 proposals must involve Noyce scholars, fellows, or projects? Just think about your answer. Okay, it is not true. You can if you choose, but you don't need to. You do need to focus on STEM teaching in high-need school districts and effectiveness and retention, but you don't have to be focused on Noyce. Is it true that track 4 proposals must include both qualitative and quantitative methods to be robust? And absolutely not. You need to include the methods that are appropriate to address the research question. Okay, let's try the next one. Is it true that Noyce track 4 proposals should include letters of commitment detailing access to appropriate data? This is a trick question. I didn't talk about it. And it's true. So particularly if you're in a project where you're involving other institutions, you need to be able to show that you'll have access to the data that you plan to analyze in the proposal. And a letter of commitment is the way we ask you to demonstrate that. And then finally, is it true that Noyce track 4 proposals must identify the methods to be used to answer the research questions, as well as a description of the sample to be studied? And it is true. Both of those things are hallmarks of a robust research proposal. Okay, Kimberly, I'll turn it over to you to see if we have any other questions that people may have at this point in the presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. And once again, thanks for being here. We want to make the best use of your time as we can. So please, if you have a question, type it in the chat. Send that to us, and then we are happy to entertain them. Please, we'll just pause for a moment, give people a chance to think and type. Sometimes webinars have waterfalls of questions. So far, we have no questions. So please hop in and ask a question. All right, we have one, but please go ahead and type in more. I'll just read it out loud, and then And then we'll do our best to address it. And if we somehow haven't addressed it, then chat with us one more time. So one of our colleagues asks, are capacity building CB proposals accepted at any time, or do they have the same deadline as track 4? So Jenny, you want to address that one?
That's a great question. They have the same deadline as track 4. So you have the same amount of time to prepare. They're not due until August 27th this year.
Yeah. Question, really good question. All right, next question from a new colleague. Would a STEM education degree satisfy the degree in STEM field requirement for PIs and co-PIs? Jenny?
I had trouble parsing the question. So when I go back to the solicitation,
Yeah.
You need to have someone who has expertise in STEM education research and someone with an advanced degree in a STEM discipline. Those are the 2 members of the project team that you need to have. You can have other members of the project team as well, no problem. I hope that addresses the question.
Yeah, if we didn't address the question, please ask us again, but I'll just repeat it. It says, would a STEM education degree satisfy the degree in a STEM field requirement for PIs and co-PIs? And my response to that is no, I don't think that is correct. I think that those are distinct. Those are made distinct. Agreeing with what Jenny said, but in slightly different language. Another question from a new colleague. Can a new track 4 build on data collected in a previous track 4?
Wow, that'd be fantastic. Yes.
Yeah, I think that would be lovely. These are all yes, no questions. Yeah, I think that would be lovely. All right, any more questions about this? All lovely questions. Thank you to those folks who typed in. Well, I'm going to encourage people to keep thinking of questions. I think we'll go on to the second part. Oh, here we go. And here's one more question, and then I'll put this one out here, and then we'll move on to the next section, and we'll come back for more Q&A in a bit. So it says, I believe the solicitation, this is from a colleague, solicitation says you need an advanced degree in STEM. Would a master's degree in a STEM content area work?
I see no reason why not. That seems like an advanced degree to me. Kimberly, do you have the same understanding?
Yeah, I think that there is some fuzziness to this, I'm going to say. I think that these solicitations, especially the Noyce solicitation, much is mandated by Congress. There are some places that are a little bit fuzzy. I think a terminal degree is often the way that it's described, a terminal degree or advanced degree, and that might differ by different STEM fields. There might be justification or rationalization why a person's expertise is really important, and that happens to be the appropriate advanced STEM degree for them. So I think for questions like that, it might be best to talk about your specific project and your specific situation with an individual program officer. Because I think it can be fuzzy. We say STEM, right? And that's defined, but if you have a project that's specifically about one content area, then there might be some consideration. So I would say, please talk with a program officer about your specific situation. And thanks for the question. All right, I think that this is one we tried to address, but I think it's always, once again, so a lot of information. Solicitations are chock full. So Jenny, what is the limit to the number of track 4 proposals from a single institution?
There's no limit, as many as you want.
Yeah, somewhat unusual for some solicitations, but there is no limit. Yeah, no limit. And one more question, and then I promise we'll go on. So one more question. If a group wanted to focus on studying a track 3 Master Teaching Fellows project, could an acceptable focus be on the effectiveness and retention of STEM teacher leaders, or would there need to be attention to the impact of teacher leaders on STEM teacher retention and effectiveness? This is in the chat. I'm happy to actually take this one, Jenny, if you want, because I think I might have encountered this before, but then I would welcome Jenny to reread it in the chat because it is hard when you're just parsing it auditory. So my impression is that if you wanted to do that study, you would need to have a component of the study that was focused on classroom STEM teacher effectiveness and retention. That has been my impression from track 4. So it's wonderful to potentially have a project that's investigating the influence of master teacher fellows. But I think that in my experience, the goal is that, yes, there has to be a focus on classroom teachers. And here I'm going to try and share this with Jenny, who cannot see it. There we go. Yes, strong motivation in the Noyce Track 4 program about classroom teachers, right? And classroom teacher practice and classroom teacher retention. Jenny, anything else you want to add right now about that, or you want to mull it for a while? We'll come back.
Yeah, I think that was great. This again is a case where you probably want to send an email, have a conversation with a program officer about how you see this fitting the solicitation. I mean, it may turn out that it does, and we're not understanding exactly what you're asking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So please do follow up.
And that's actually a great transition to the next part of the webinar. And we're about halfway through our time. So thank you to everybody for putting questions out there. So if we could move on to the next slide, then we're gonna, in the second sort of chunk of the webinar, we're gonna talk about proposal preparation with sort of an angle towards Noyce Track 4 proposals. So next slide. Some people are very experienced with NSF. Some people are brand new to NSF. So thank you for folks who are experienced, because some of this might be obvious to you. I will say, I think I've been involved with NSF for a long time, and I always discover something new. So Jenny was just talking about, it could be great to speak with, a program officer about your ideas before you submit your proposal. And a project summary is something that's required of every proposal. And it's a one-page document, and it's often a great thing to draft and then send to a program director in advance to say, hey, I'd like to have a conversation with you about my ideas. In the project summary that is required to be submitted with a proposal that's no more than one page, the overview, the first sentence really has to indicate that this is a track 4 proposal, so don't forget to do that. It should name all the institutions and partners. There are usually lots of them, including the high need school district or districts that are involved, nonprofit organizations as appropriate, anyone who's a key partner in the project. And that really sort of sets the stage, and then you can describe kind of your project. It's really important in that project summary and required that you have separate sections labeled for intellectual merit and for broader impacts. Those are the two NSF-wide merit review criteria. And the intellectual merit, in shorthand, we'll talk about it more in just a minute, tries to make the case for how this work is important, the design of the project, the new knowledge that might be generated and that might grow the field, address gaps in the literature and what we understand. Whereas the broader impacts labeled section in that project summary should address and share for the readers, for the reviewers, and for program officers and staff, what is the benefit of this work to STEM education more broadly, to people who aren't necessarily directly involved in the project, to society, that broader impacts. So the project summary is something that's required for your proposal submission, but it's often something that's really great to work on early and often, and then you can use that as a tool to reach out and have conversations with program directors about your ideas. So next slide. So the next key thing in conveying your ideas is the project description, which is a 15-page document. And for the Noyce Track 4 proposals, and you can refer back to the solicitation for this as well, they're really key sections that you just want to make sure that you address, and you can do it in lots of different ways, lots of different order, but you really need to include section on broader impacts very explicitly about the work. You need to include what Jenny referred to before, your sort of literature review, situating the project and what's known and what's not known, and really importantly, the theoretical framework or frameworks that's going to guide the research questions, the analysis thread all the way through the project. Jenny alluded to how important it is to convey the methods for your project that align with your research questions. And I will say that that can range for things like your data collection instruments, your evidence of measurement validity, how you're going to work on that, your data analysis plans. So it's very important to, as Jenny said, thread all those through. I think it can be very challenging for reviewers when there's a plan with lots of data that will be collected, but it's unclear how that data will be analyzed to generate insights to the research questions, which is related to the knowledge generation. So it needs to be very clear in the proposal what new knowledge will be generated, how this will expand our understanding of STEM teacher effectiveness and retention in high-needs school districts. And then, as alluded to before, you need a section on evaluation, independent input into the project. And as mentioned before, that could be an external evaluator, that could be an advisory board. It's really important not only to name those people, but to describe what their role is, what they're going to do, how they're going to meet or accomplish those things, and on what timeline. So details of that. And then lastly, dissemination. I think reviewers really appreciate a thoughtful dissemination plan, right? Like the aspirations would, of course, be that the information, the knowledge generated would be shared, but how would that be shared? And are there creative ways or unique or interesting ways that would be shared beyond the people who are involved in the project? And how would that be accomplished and on what timeline? There's also a note here on this slide in smaller font that there should be a results from prior NSF support section. I encourage you to label it, even if you've never had prior NSF support. I encourage you to put a label and put none so that it's easy for reviewers to find. But you will need to discuss results from prior NSF support within that 15-page project description. I won't go into the details, but there are instructions about how to do that and what exactly should be included in the NSF PPG proposals and award policies and procedures guide. And I will just take this will remind me to share that there is a new updated one that you'll want to refer to. I think that it's linked at the end of the slides, but the PAPG, as it is fondly called, I guess, has some instructions that might be helpful. Formally, there's a note on here that NSF no longer requires a section entitled intellectual merit. So many of the things that are in this list are intellectual merit. You are, of course, always welcome to do that, but that's not formally required in the project description in the way that it is required for the one-page project summary. All right, next slide, please. So we've been sort of we've referred to the NSF merit review criteria, which are across the entire foundation. And the two things that reviewers are asked to really consider when evaluating Noyce Track 4 proposals are the intellectual merit and the broader impacts. And so intellectual merit, a different way to say it, what is the potential for the proposed activity to advance knowledge and understanding within its own field or across different fields? I think that is the formal NSF definition of intellectual merit. What will we know at the end of the project that we don't know now is a shorthand that I often hear reviewers kind of using. And that is distinct, but equally important is broader impacts, which is what is the potential for the proposed activity to benefit society or advance specific desired societal outcomes. Both of those things are really important to address. Now, when reviewers are asked to evaluate proposals, all proposals, with Noyce Track 4 proposals, next slide, please, there are a set of questions that they're sort of posed with that apply to both intellectual merit and broader impacts, but they're often good questions to keep in mind when you're writing your project summary, when you're writing your project description, because putting yourself in the place of reviewers who are having these questions in mind when they're reading your proposal. So the first one, to what extent do the proposed activities suggest and explore creative, original, or potentially transformative concepts, right? And so that is really about knowledge generation, addressing gaps in the literature. And so if you read your own project description, you read your own project summary, like, is it clear from what you write that how reviewers might interpret that question? The second is the plan for carrying out the proposed activities well-reasoned, well-organized, and based on a sound rationale. And much like Jenny said, I think of that as a thread through the proposal. It's easy to say, but I will say personally, it's hard to do. It's challenging to do, to really put on paper for reviewers what it is you really want to understand, why it is you want to understand that, how you're going to be able to, what research questions you'll have, how you're going to collect data on those research questions, how you're going to analyze it, how you're going to generate that new knowledge. So that is absolutely something that reviewers are looking closely at in the documents. The third question that they're posed with, does the plan incorporate a mechanism to assess success? This is often centered in the evaluation plan, but may be related to knowledge generation as well. So those evaluation plans and places for getting independent input are a part of that, but how will you know if you've addressed the research question successfully is key. How qualified is the individual, team, or organization to conduct the proposed activities? So there are some requirements, as we talked about in the first question and answer piece, but really it's for you all as a team to make that case in your 15-page project description about why this is the right team to do this particular work. And then lastly, are there adequate resources available to the PI, either at the home organization or through collaborations to carry out the proposed activities? This is often can get talked about in terms of feasibility, right? Like it might be a wonderful plan, but is this feasible to happen in this context, in this amount of time with the resources that seem to be available? So these questions are on lots of NSF websites and sort of resource document guides, but they're important things I think to keep in mind when you're writing any NSF proposal and also when writing a Track 4 proposal. So next slide. So we have also a checking for understanding slide, and the question that is posed is, which of the following must, in all capitals, be included in the proposal? So I'm just going to pause for a moment. There aren't too many words. Just read that list and mull. I'll just take 30 seconds for mulling, and then I promise you I will go through it and I will address the question. All right. So thank you for your patience with that. For some people, that is not enough time, and I apologize. I appreciate a lot of silence. For other people, that was like a long time. So once again, the slides will be posted. You can come back to them. So let's go through the list. So a project summary with intellectual merit and broader impacts labeled. That is absolutely what must be included with the proposal. So that is correct. And please do make sure you attend to those labeled sections in the one-page project summary. The next one is a 15-page project description. That is absolutely correct. You get a 15-page project description. Please don't include extra appendices. They will be returned. So that 15 pages is really key. Do not include extra things there. The dissemination plan. Yes, we really do need a dissemination plan. That is something that is required to be in the proposal. So we know how that knowledge generated and learned from the project was going to get out of the local environment. Results of prior NSF support, if applicable, absolutely needs to be included. I won't go into the details of that, but please look into what needs to be included there. And if you have no prior NSF support, just put the label and put none. Research questions. So absolutely, there need to be clear sort of research questions. I think there's latitude in how those are presented. People from different disciplinary cultures and traditions may present them in different ways, but as Jenny said, really articulating what it is you're trying to figure out, that's usually in terms of research questions, is really key for a Noyce Track 4 proposal. The next, research, design, data sources, methodology. There could be lots more in that list, but yes, so really detailed methodological plans. These are research proposals, and so the research design and data analysis plans, all the details of those kinds of things to convince reviewers that you can address the research questions must be included in the proposal. Relevant research literature, yes, you need that in there to describe how you're going to address gaps in literature, how you're going to generate new knowledge for the field. So please, yes, that must be included. And then lastly, a plan for external evaluation. Yes, that must be included. So this is a list, and a couple of people kind of wrote to me and said, all of them. And I would agree with that, all of them, and much more needs to be included in the proposal, but those are ones to definitely keep in mind. All right. Okay, time is a flying. So last slide for this section. Next slide, please. General tips for success. And I will say that Jenny and I are here as ambassadors for the Noyce program, but the things that we're sharing are sort of accrued wisdom and knowledge from lots of people over many years. And so this general tips for success slide includes some of that wisdom. So the first one is be aware of prior and ongoing projects and advances in the field and situate your work in those, discuss those results. So be sure that you're attending to things that are coming out recently. I will also say that you can look on the NSF award search to see what kind of active Noyce Track 4 projects are going on. I think our AAAS colleagues have a wonderful collection of what's going on in projects as well, so please attend to that. Related, number 2, cite the literature, right? Really position your work in the context of what is known in the field. The third one, include timelines and benchmarks in your plan. In general, but especially for getting independent feedback. So that's something that really can help reviewers understand how the project's going to be iterative and get feedback along the way. Number 4, and this comes up in a couple of ways, propose a cost-effective but high-impact project. I think that's about being very thoughtful about the budget, right? And being cost-effective with the monies that you're requesting. I will say the budget justification is a lovely place to really be able to communicate with reviewers about why you need certain things and why you're asking for them. Number 5, make sure you've included all of the required details in sections. I read that and it seems very aspirational. I mean, I think everyone aspires to do that. And it's hard to know sometimes if you've left something out, but please, like use all of these sort of checklists and resources. The solicitation is a really important document to study all along the way. So please use that. Number 6, if resubmitting a previously declined proposal, please consider reviewers' feedback and please do not resubmit the declined proposal without making substantive changes. So while a new group of people will likely review a resubmitted proposal, it's really important to consider reviewers' feedback and what you submit a second time should really be taking advantage of that really thoughtful advice that colleagues have given in their review service at NSF. Number 7, put yourself in the reviewer's place. So like if you were a reviewer, and please, if you have interest in serving as a Noyce reviewer, you cannot do that if you're submitting a proposal, but at other times, please consider doing that. Put yourself in the reviewer's place. What is it that people understand, not understand? And have critical friends, have other folks read the proposal before it's submitted finally to NSF. Provide supporting details to substantiate identified partnerships. Jenny referred to letters of commitment in certain cases that would be important to include. And then number 9, align the requested budget with the scale and scope of the work. I think that is kind of a bit of a repeat of please ask for what you need and justify why you need the monies that are requested. And then number 10, please do not hesitate to reach out to call. I don't think that's the greatest way to do it, but email Cognizant NSF Noyce program officers. It's a really wonderful team of folks. We're ready to organize meetings. We'd love to meet you. We'd love to answer questions beyond this webinar format. And please don't hesitate to do that. So I will stop there. I think those are the general tips on proposal preparation. So we are here now at the second Q&A, question and answer part of our time together. And I'm going to scroll back. Just give me a moment. Here we go. And there are some questions that are left over from the last piece. So I'm going to go back to them. Jenny, does that sound good? It says, is the dissemination heading required, or could we use a different term such as propagation that avoids the negative connotations of the word dissemination? Jenny, you want to take this one?
That would be welcome. The idea is that you have your plan to share the knowledge that you generate with the appropriate communities, and however you label that doesn't matter. We're looking at the quality of the plan. So great question.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I think the only language and the only labels that are specifically required are intellectual merit and broader impacts. Those are the only ones that I would definitely keep. All right, another question. And Jenny, you can always bounce them back to me. If I give them to you, you can just say, Kimberly, take them. Do Track 4 proposals need to include all Noyce funding to an institution under prior NSF support, the way Track 1s, 2, and 3s have to, or just enough to represent all the PIs? I'm not sure I fully understand that, but I think it's about how much information about prior NSF support needs to be included in a track 4? And is it similar or different than tracks 1, 2, and 3?
It is not different from tracks 1, 2, and 3, that I can say. I always go back to the solicitation and review it, but there's no difference there. Track 4 is the same as the other tracks in that regard.
All right, so I think that's a yes, but if you have clarifying follow-ups, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat or to reach out to us. All right, so here is another one. So can a track 4 be focused on an aspect of effectiveness and retention that is new and not necessarily related to what we currently consider to be part of a prep program? Here, the idea would be to identify something that might become a valuable component of STEM teacher education. Jenny?
I think that sounds like a very interesting proposal and aligned with the solicitation. Kimberly, do you have the same impression?
Oh, I absolutely have the same impression. And I will even add that I think that the term teacher effectiveness can evoke really specific expectations and ideas among folks sometimes. If you read the solicitation, I think that there's a lovely language there that I will not be able to quote exactly that has a more expansive view of how we think about teacher effectiveness. There is definitely an encouragement to get to the level of student level data, but that could relate to cultural effectiveness. That could relate to lots of different aspects of effectiveness. So yeah, I think that sounds like a wonderful idea. It sounds like something that would address gaps in the field. It would build our knowledge. And so I think absolutely yes to that colleague who's trying to identify new variables related to teacher effectiveness and retention. Other questions, please. Or if my colleagues, I am looking at the chat, but if I've missed one, please don't hesitate to let me know. Scrolling back. All right. We're waiting. We're welcome new questions, but in the spirit of time, Jenny, I might suggest we do our last couple of slides. Yeah, so we'll move on to this.
Perfect. So what might have happened as you were listening to this webinar is you thought, oh, I have a really cool research idea, but I'm not sure it's a match for Noyce Track 4. I mean, we encourage you to talk with one of us to be sure that the way you're thinking is correct. But if it isn't a match, it may be a match for something else. And we really do want to encourage research in this area. So there are 3 programs here that might be a match for research ideas that aren't quite a fit for Noyce. The first one, Improving Undergraduate STEM Education, we call IUS. And that's focused on undergraduate education in STEM, which includes teacher preparation. The second one, EDU Core Research, which we call ECR, that's about fundamental research at any level to increase our understanding of what works for education. And these contributions don't have to have direct classroom applications. They can be contributions to theory. And then the last one, the Racial Equity in STEM Education, is an exciting program, but it has some fairly specific requirements. So I would encourage you to take a look at the solicitation there and see if your project would meet those requirements potentially. But those 3 are potential homes for ideas that aren't quite a fit for track 4, but are still definitely well worth doing. And there are others too, and program officers are happy to talk with you about what programs at NSF might be a fit for the research you want to do. Next slide. Finally, these are some resources. As Kimberly said, these slides will be available to you, and these resources are clickable. I want to point out the Proposal and Award Policies and Procedures Guide, NSF 24-1, will be coming out very soon and effective in May. So it will be in place for the August deadline. And of course, read the solicitation 23-586 continually as you're preparing your proposal. There's a lot. Making a checklist to be sure you've got everything is a really good idea. Thank you. Next slide. We said, Kimberly and I are Happy to take any questions you have about Noyce Track 4, but the rest of our colleagues are happy to take your questions as well. We're not the only people who think about Track 4. We're just the two people doing the webinar today. So here's our email addresses. Reach out to any one of us and we'll be happy to work with you to get your proposal into NSF. We're excited about your ideas for sure. Next slide.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Kimberly, I think you're taking the last set of questions.
Yeah, no,
Now general.
Thanks to everyone. I know you that no one on this call has an hour to spend on a webinar, so I really appreciate everyone being here. Hopefully some of the things that we've said are maybe helpful, like, oh, I didn't realize that, or food for thought, something that you're like, oh, I really need to follow up on that. We really appreciate your interest in the NSF Noyce program in general, but then specifically the Track 4 Noyce research opportunities that are available. I think we've said a million times, but please don't hesitate to reach out to any of us. And if there are more questions in the chat, I'm looking out for them. I've got some nice thank yous. Thank you. You're welcome. You're very, very welcome. But please don't hesitate. We will hang on here for a few more minutes. And I will say that there are probably a lot of questions that are specific to like your own projects, and this is a webinar that's going to be posted, so we want to be really thoughtful and protective of each of you in that sense. And so if there are things that are really specific to your projects, really do please reach out to an individual program officer, and we're happy to schedule time with you. I have a couple of questions. One, could these slides be shared with us? Absolutely. I will defer to my AAAS colleagues if they want to say anything about the timeline of that. Anyone?
Yep. So actually, these slides will be posted on the nsfnoyce.org website. And once this webinar is over, I can go ahead and post those. So they'll be available immediately. And we'll send an email to everyone who's registered with links to all the recordings, which will also be on that webpage. And we'll provide links to the slides as well, just for easy access.
Yeah, that would be awesome. That would be awesome. And we worked really hard to make sure all the clickable links were updated. And so I think there is really a lot of information available in that slide set. If you find anything amiss, please don't hesitate to reach out and let us know. And there's one more question. It says, I can't seem to access projects funded under the Noyce program on the NSF website, but I can access other programs such as NSF, NRT, IPP. Do not know. I do not know. Anyone else? Maybe that individual could reach out to one of us individually, but I'm not sure exactly where you're looking, but I think we could work on that for you if you need some support or if there's some technical issue. Then I appreciate you identifying it and we can see what we can do about that. All right, I'm seeing lots of thanks. We have 6 more minutes. I want to turn it back over to our really wonderful AAAS hosts who make all this possible. Thank you so much. And so I'll turn it back over to Drew and Betty.
Thank you so much for appreciate that. As Kimberly said, I know an hour for webinars are for a lot of people, so I just have a few more closing remarks to mention. This is only the second webinar in the series where we will go through all the tracks and IUs, as Jenny and Kimberly stated. So tomorrow, the most immediate one is tomorrow, April 25th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. That will be covering track 1 and capacity building that we mentioned. And just quickly, again, I want to thank our NSF colleagues, the rest of the IC team, and all of you who are able to join and participate in the webinar today. We have a survey link, which we'll be posting in the chat, and we'll be sending it via email as well, most likely tomorrow morning or like midday Eastern Time. That survey should only take a few minutes, but we really appreciate your feedback. It helps us prepare for these sessions that we'll continue to do as new solicitations come out, as more projects gain interest. And as mentioned, a recording of the presentation will be posted on our website and emailed to you in the coming days. And we'll include the slides in that email as well. They'll be on the NSF website more immediately, but just so you have it right all together. And that's it from our end. Anything else from Kimberly, Jenny? Any closing remarks?
No, I will just say I will say lots of people in the chat are like, oh, this is such a good refresher. Like, I've been doing this for a while and I learned new things. And so I just want to say, if you're brand new and this is overwhelming, then there are people who have done this for a while and they're learning new things. So I always learn new things when I'm even preparing. So please know that there are lots of resources and you can revisit these ideas and reach out again. Jenny, you get last word.
Really have any last words, Kimberly, except to encourage people to reach out with questions. We really are eager to work with you. And thanks for your time.
Beautiful. Thank you both so much. And thank you all so much for attending. I hope to see you at one of the remaining 3, one tomorrow, one Friday, and then next on May 1st. And with that, enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.